Have you ever had that just really unsettling feeling of watching yourself from a distance? Or maybe you've looked at the world around you and it felt off, not quite real, almost like you're in a dream? Well, for some people, this isn't just a passing thought. It's a persistent and pretty distressing state. Okay, let's dive into this little known but surprisingly common condition. To really get what this feels like, just listen to this account from a writer who's experienced it. Visible but not present. Wow. That phrase, it just gets right to the very heart of the profound detachment that defines depersonalization/derealization disorder, or DPDR for short. So before we slap any clinical labels on it, let's just talk about the raw, personal experience. What does it actually feel like to be a stranger to yourself? Well, people who go through this tend to describe it in a few key ways. It can feel like you're literally watching a movie of your own life instead of, living it. You might feel this deep numbness, like a total disconnect from your own emotions. Or maybe you find that big, important memories just don't feel like they belong to you anymore. The whole world can seem dreamlike, and you might even feel like you're not really in control of what you say or do. Now, here's something that is absolutely critical to understand. This is not psychosis. People with DPDR know something is wrong. They have what's called intact reality testing. They are so aware that their perception is altered, which is, as you can imagine, terrifying. But in a weird way, it's also grounding. They know they aren't crazy, and that knowledge is key. Okay, so what do we call this whole collection of strange and disorienting feelings? Let's get into the clinical vocabulary that helps us define and really understand this experience. The big umbrella term here is dissociation. And honestly, the best way to think of it is like your brain's own personal firewall. When it's faced with overwhelming stress or trauma, the brain can just put up a wall. It disconnects from certain thoughts, feelings, or even your sense of self, all as a way to protect you. So, under that big dissociation umbrella, you've got two main flavors. First, there's depersonalization. That's the internal stuff, the feeling of being detached from your own body, your own thoughts. Then there's derealization. That's the external feeling, the sense that the world and the people around you just aren't real. So here's the thing. While those are two really distinct feelings, they almost always show up together. It's like a package deal. And because of that, they're officially combined into one single diagnosis: depersonalization/derealization disorder, DPDR. Right. This all leads to the obvious next question. Why? Why does this even happen? I mean, why would the brain decide to pull off such a profound disconnect from reality? Let's get into the roots of it. Research points overwhelmingly in one direction: trauma. DPDR has a really strong link to overwhelming experiences, especially trauma that happens early in life, like emotional neglect or abuse. When something is just too painful or too threatening for the brain to handle, it might just split it off from your consciousness as a way to survive. And what's fascinating is how this trauma response is so different from what we usually think of with PTSD, the fight or flight response. Standard PTSD is about emotional hyperarousal. Your heart's racing, you're on edge. But with this dissociative subtype, it's the total opposite. Emotional overmodulation. It's numbing. Your heart rate actually slows down, and the brain's emotional centers are dampened. It's not fight or flight. It's more like freeze and numb. So how does the brain actually manage to do this? How does it generate this incredible sense of numbness and detachment? Let's look at the neurobiology behind it. It all comes down to a process called the frontal limbic inhibition model. Sounds fancy, but let's break it down. First, some kind of trigger sets off the brain's emotional alarm system, the amygdala. In response, the prefrontal cortex, which is kind of like the brain's CEO, goes into overdrive to shut that alarm down. This top-down control then forcefully dampens the activity of the whole limbic system, which is in charge of emotions and body sensations. And the result? A profound state of emotional numbness and detachment. To put it really simply, the thinking part of the brain slams the brakes on the feeling part. It's supposed to be a protective mechanism, but it's hitting those brakes way, way too hard, basically cutting the driver off from the whole experience of being on the road. All right, so now that we've covered the what, the why, and the how, let's zoom out. How common is this experience, really? And what are the challenges people face when they actually live with it? You might think this sounds incredibly rare, but DPDR is estimated to affect 1 to 2% of the global population. I mean, do the math, that's potentially more than 75 million people. This is not some fringe phenomenon. It's a major mental health issue that's pretty much hiding in plain sight. And it usually starts pretty early in life. The average onset is during adolescence. In fact, it's really rare for it to start after age 40, and only about 5% of all cases begin after someone turns 25. But here's the part that's just so frustrating. Despite how common it is, there's a huge lack of awareness about it. On average, it takes someone suffering from DPDR between 7 and 12 years to get a correct diagnosis. Can you just imagine feeling unreal for over a decade before anyone can even give you a name for what you're going through? And GPDR often shows up alongside other conditions. The data shows its prevalence is around 2% in people who have either an anxiety or a mood disorder. But when a person has both, the rate of clinically significant DPDR jumps to almost 12%. That suggests that the combined stress is a really powerful trigger for this sense of unreality. So, what's the big takeaway from all of this? It's that this profound feeling of being unreal isn't just in someone's head. It is a legitimate, measurable, neurobiological response to severe stress. It's a survival mechanism that's gone haywire, and it often leaves people feeling completely alone and misunderstood for years on end. And that brings us to the final and really the central question. If our brains are smart enough to learn how to disconnect from overwhelming pain just to survive, the challenge then becomes, how do we teach them to safely reconnect so that a person can stop just surviving and start truly living?